The following podcast contains language that is not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Are you a real man? You don't listen to podcasts unless they're ranking the best boobs, am I right? And hey, is everyone else around you emotional? Emotions are for women. Real men push their feelings down. We use booze as a chaser, and none of that light beer wussy shit. And everyone out there chasing happiness just pisses you off. Real men aren't happy. We're mad. We're determined. We make the real sacrifices. Hell, we know the world is a competition and only alphas can protect the weak. Real men don't need safe spaces. We just punch faces. Your girlfriend wants to talk about your day. Talk about your day. No fucking way. We'll be in the garage working on the transmission. And you know what? Who needs a girlfriend anyway? They'll just slow us down. You're the toughest, most stoic son of a bitch around. No one gets you but other alphas. And even we don't talk about those things. Yeah, maybe it's hard. And sometimes you wish someone would just, talk to you or ask you, how you doing? But that's not what you need. You need testosterone and maybe a bazooka to blow up I don't know. It's pretty damn exhausting keeping this up. Maybe we should have a raw, authentic, and vulnerable conversation on masculinity one of these days. Or maybe I'll just finish chugging this beer and none of that sissy-ass wine stuff that women hold in their hands while they sit on their folded legs on the couch and talk about their feelings going back and forth and back and forth. Never mind.
Fasten your seatbelts. It might be a bumpy hour, 'cause now we're going there. Taboo topics are back on the table.
Hey bros, I just won the arm wrestling contest, so I guess I get to be host for this episode. I'm Matt. Welcome back to another episode of Season 3 of the Going There podcast. Today what we're going to do is turn the notions of being a man and masculinity on their heads. When you have these talk boxes out there with big influence, people like Jesse Waters of Fox News or Andrew Tate or Matt Walsh or Nick Fuentes, and unfortunately the list goes on and on. When they're the ones telling people what being a man is and what masculinity is, we need to be the counter to that movement. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to stop mansplaining the toxic definitions of masculinity and what it means to be a man. And I have two wonderful people here at the table with me and a third calling in for a little bit as well. So let's start with a returning guest, one of my favorite humans on the face of the planet, Mr. Peter Toomey.
Well, obviously you need higher standards.
Agreed.
But guilty. Local guy, lived my entire life in Cleveland, cradle Catholic, still go to church, go figure. Actor and singer and softball player and bicycle tourist and
all around badass
and all around bad. Oh God. Well, I'm having a good time wearing this skin and we'll see where it goes. But I was tickled with your invitation because I've probably been wall to wall, all of that stuff. And well, I'm hopefully over here more, but we'll see when we talk. We all have
been, which is why you guys are perfect guests.
Appreciate the invite.
Thanks for being here and teeing up a brand new face and voice for this season, Jacob.
Yes. Thank you so much for the invitation. Grateful to be here. I'm a father first and foremost, former professional hockey player. I've done a lot of work on myself I think that has ultimately led me to sitting in this chair here. And again, just grateful for this opportunity and looking forward to where it goes. And I think I have a good understanding, at least in my own mind, on what it means to be a man. And excited to see where this goes.
Well, you guys are both perfect guests because neither of you pretend to know the exact definition, because that's I hate to jump to the end of the episode here, but that's the answer. There is no one size fits all definition. And that's what we need to get away from. And joining us remotely, Hassan, what do you have to say about this?
Hey, everybody. I'm Hassan Rogers. I'm a freelance writer, a theater artist, man's man about town, and happy to be a part of this show about masculinity. I think it's one of those things where we don't talk about guys enough, especially if we're not just bitching and moaning at the bar. So, yeah, I'm a guy I am Guy. I'm a dad. I'm a grandpa. I'm a husband. I'm divorced, second married. I got a whole lot of masculine chevrons on my sleeve. So here's one of my most proud masculine traits is that I'm honest and I like to self-assess in my leadership. My leadership has taught me that I'm scared of bad roads, it's bad weather, and I didn't drive. That's why I'm not sitting at the panel today.
So this conversation here is obviously the tip of the iceberg. This is a conversation that needs to be talked about frequently in people of all ethnicities, all cultures, different gender identities that still see themselves as either men or masculine or any of those things. And so keep in mind as you're listening to, like, we're going to have to be a little generic in some of these terms because it's so layered and so nuanced. It's impossible to talk to all of those things. So really, all of us are talking about it from our own perception, from our own lens. What makes this conversation really great is to also turn the notion on its head that, like, the only men who are going to talk about the kind of stuff we're talking about are pansies and wusses. Mr. Peter Toomey is a former drill sergeant in the United States Army. Correct?
That is true.
Yeah. He's also built like a brick shithouse. This man is 175 years old, and you wouldn't think he's a day over 41. No, Peter is an athlete. The guy is playing in sports nonstop. I'm bragging for you, so I'll keep going. I mean, he's a man's man in every sense of the word. Jacob, the last sport a wuss would ever be able to play is hockey, professional hockey. And you used to play professionally for
the local Monsters here in Cleveland. It was a long time ago now, but signed an NHL contract with the Anaheim Ducks and thought I was on top of the world and thought I had everything figured out until I didn't and realized there's so much more I can be doing.
And you also played overseas.
Yeah. I played over in Europe for 7 years across 6 different countries. And so grateful. I never thought that hockey would lead me over to Europe. I was always just so laser focused on the NHL and had my opportunity, but I was a mental midget in a lot of ways and a victim, an innocent victim at times. And it took me going over there to lower level leagues to kind of realize that I was the problem, but I was also the solution as well.
See, and that level of humility and vulnerability is exactly why. And you have done or are doing your own podcasts on things very much similar to this, right?
Yeah. No, I'm not currently doing it. It's been a little while since I've even produced a show, but I did it for a couple seasons. It was called Raw, Authentic, and Vulnerable. Just, bringing different people on, just normal people, everyday people, to give them a voice, knowing the struggles that I went through in regards to mental health and just having a safe space for somebody to come on and share their story. And it was great. I'm not currently doing it, though.
Can I steal that title for this episode? Yeah, because I think that's what this needs to be. It's all of those things, right?
And let's not let that slip by, because he said, I'm the problem, but I'm also the solution. And I think that's something that every guy could learn something from.
Yes. Every human, but especially with the current climate of toxic masculinity, because the finger pointing is usually the root of all of that anger and vitriol that we see online and on the airwaves and everything else. It's somebody else's problem. Being a guy is tough these days. Oh my gosh, we can't just grab women's asses in the office. I mean, it's tough being a guy. It's not that tough being a guy, man. It really isn't. It's tough being a human. But that's about it.
And you have a guy like me who grew up in a place called Garden Valley. It's a neighborhood in the Lower East Side of Cleveland, Ohio, where one of our common sayings was, I hit so hard, I make bricks bleed, because we grew up in brick cities. We grew up in projects. That type of environment where everyone's going to have a physical test, either in your peer group or suffering from as a subordinate position to an older peer group that you'll have a rites of passage to fight through. But in that environment, Darwinism was true. There's something about the strong and the survival of the fittest, especially with males. We do define our pecking order by some type of challenge and or test. For me, sports and intellect became my two battlefields. One, I'm very good with my hands in pugilism because I lost all my fights against my older brothers in the house. So my record at home is 0 for everything. But in the street, no one can say they had a chance at dog walk and Haas. And I don't brag about that, but that's because I got dog walk every day in the house. There's gonna be balance. For you to be a strong man, if you don't got those fallen moments, you're never gonna have a crest moment. You can't be crestfallen without having fallen. The crest is from the bottom, it goes up. It's at the top. We got to start at the bottom. I started at the bottom in my house, the bottom in my neighborhood, where fighting and proving yourself in various forms became a daily existence. So when I made it to places like my first press conference as a young broadcaster, and I'm looking at some of these guys. Yeah, I go into the room sizing up guys and who if a fight broke out, who can handle me? That's my thinking as a young man. So that type of masculinity, it never stops. Guys do it. They just do it in different ways. I've seen guys do it with you. They want to show you how smart they are about technical terms and equipment. And then you say, well, what, it really doesn't matter because I'm just going to edit that shit out in the end. I've seen guys do it, even subconsciously guys do it. So I think us finding pecking orders, no matter how we did it, whether it was growing up in the projects, fighting through your way, or just a series of personal tests showing that you, one, can be knocked down and get up again. That's the test. Being knocked down and getting back up without blaming how you got knocked down, and that's tough. That's very tough to not blame others.
Also, I made sure that there was diversity in generation too. So Peter, you come from the generation, as even more so than Jacob and I do, where it's like, you need to be a real man. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. No one's going to help you out. And you punch your way to the front of that line.
I was a kid to the greatest generation. My dad was in WW too. He was a good guy. But yeah, that generation, they fought the war. They saved the world for humanity.
And as we talked about on a Generation Gap episode last season that you were on, none of this is pointing the finger at the individuals. No one is saying your father, because you learned about X, Y, or Z, was bad. They were people of their time who had the little information in front of them, and they were further on down Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and they were acting in ways which they really, truly cared and thought would propel them forward, and gave you that as their kid.
For sure, because I believe that every human does the best they can in every given moment. So given the circumstances, given their abilities, given their experiences, and given their inclinations, everybody does the best they can.
And just like Peter, my father was also of that greatest generation that we heard Brokaw talk about so much.
Let's start there, because that actually is my next question. Is let's look backward before we look forward. What were you taught, either explicitly or implied, that being a man and what real masculinity was as a younger growing person, as you were developing and learning?
I was lucky. I just said Dad was a good guy, and loved Mom, loved her long after she died at 65, and remained loving her, till he died at
174.
No, but a whisker shy of 91.
Wow.
But
you got good. Look,
I got good genes.
this isn't the Sydney Sweeney thing. I'm just saying you got good genes.
I got good genes. And I've been trying to take care of them. But Dad's was one of those personal responsibility kind of guys. He had a decent job, on the home front, working in a critical industry, steel, and probably didn't have to go, but went. He was mid-Pacific at VJ Day, and he said, to Jacob's comment, if you think you've got a problem, you are also the solution. Not those words, not that succinctly said, but he did indeed say, hey, it's up to you. Live your life. Make decisions for yourself.
Dare I say that's pretty enlightened for that time.
I would agree, but it was good for me, and I've tried to remain true to that.
So as let's say a young kid going into the Army, that period of time, how would you define a man, somebody who was, embodied those values?
It was interesting that you call my Army experience.
Well, that's a turning point for a lot of people, or it's a gateway into what they think is in their fate.
It certainly can be, and those were amazingly interesting days to look back on. Living them,
you wouldn't go back and redo it.
We could talk, but I was a college graduate. I'd had a 4-year student deferment. I, through just the luck of the draw, did indeed get the chance to attend the Leaders Academy and work as a drill sergeant at a basic training company for the vast majority of my 2-year enlistment. But at the time, I was working in the 1st platoon, and the 2nd platoon was being led by Sergeant Richard Henry. Richard Henry was a 18-year Army veteran, several tours overseas. He'd served in combat. And he was brown shoe Army. At the time he enlisted, the standard uniform was brown shoes for enlisted people. And that was more than just a reference to what he was wearing. It was a whole mindset. This is the way we do it, So there came a day. Sergeant Henry had his troops run inside and bring their footlockers out and line up in the company street with their footlockers at their feet. And Richard Henry said, "The first peep I hear out of your people, you'll be holding those footlockers over your heads for the rest of this 45-minute period of instruction." And Sergeant Toomey, who
you're like, hey man, peace and love.
No, didn't go that far, because there was still a lesson to be learned there. But I said, gentlemen, we can do this either Sergeant Henry's way, or I'd prefer that we all sit over there in the shady side, in the shade side of the barracks, and you will listen to every single word that I have to say. And the first peep I hear out of you, we'll do it Sergeant Henry's way. It's your choice. So I needed I needed their commitment, and I needed them to learn the lesson that they were responsible for each other, because one guy screws up and we're all back out in the sun. Yeah. Sergeant Henry, by the way, chose not to re-enlist for his final 2 years to pull a full U.S. Army pension. And he went home because the Army had changed that much for him.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was a very interesting time. Long story, sorry about that. But I'm not a super patriot, but college graduate, was given the opportunity to complete that course of studies, and
but you saw a sense of duty,
and
a
my
sense
country,
of leadership,
yeah,
and a sense of community and brotherhood.
Yeah,
which
and it was there.
There's nothing about that that's outdated. But I'm sure some of the views and the way that cultural America at that time, especially watching your parents' generation before that, but then going into a war where people suddenly did not love the troops so much.
Oh, we were right in the heart of that.
Okay.
I was in the heart of Vietnam, and I had seen the protests on the campus at Notre Dame before I graduated. So no, this was a hot
Different
subject.
time.
Yeah.
Jacob, how about you? You have a really interesting backstory, and you share it on your podcast. You don't have to go too deep into it here, but same question. Don't give as long of an answer as Peter, but same question. Growing up as a young developing man who was probably an athlete the whole time, right? You don't just land in the pros on accident. What was your idea of a man and what that means?
It was very much just suck it up, move on, and let it go. Which is all great if you're provided with context and how to do that. But for me growing up, I didn't ever really have a positive male role model to learn from. Love my father, have a lot of grace and compassion for him, but he wasn't healthy. He was an alcoholic himself, and he had his own demons that he was, fighting. I don't think he was aware that he was fighting them, but, I had him. I had my older brothers that I certainly always looked up to, but they too were facing things that they knew nothing about then, and still to this day, certainly view myself as the cycle breaker within my family lineage. So yeah, when I reflect back, I know for myself that I just lacked somebody just healthy in my life. I wasn't finding it in hockey. It was a lot of just screaming and a lot of the same kind of suck it up, move on, just run through a wall. I didn't have anybody there teaching me, guiding me that I could either climb over that wall or just walk around it. I didn't have to.
Or giving you the tools to actually climb the wall.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
here's a rope.
Yeah. So, that in my mind, it was, now I had that example as a person growing up that, we don't deal with things. We don't process emotions.
So it was more implied than it was explained to you.
Yeah. I could see. And again, when you're a kid, my younger sister and I have talked a lot about this. When you see kind of that example before, you don't understand what's taking place. You don't understand the suppression that's taking place.
And that's all you know.
Sure.
You see it and you go, oh, I guess this is just how men behave.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't understand then. Like, my dad was funny. He'd be drunk and he'd be telling jokes and us kids would be laughing. I didn't understand the pain underneath it all. I see it obviously for what it is now. But again, that was my example as a person. And then I would get into the arena, into the hockey space, where that was kind of my escape. That was where I could go to just be myself and express the skill that I had, that obviously I had to work hard at. But I got there and it became in times and at times an unsafe place as well, just with the toxic masculinity that takes place within the hockey culture and how
sports.
Yeah, exactly.
But especially hockey.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is such a physical sport, and there is a lot of emotional abuse that takes place within it. And again, I'm young. I don't understand that. You just kind of fall victim to unconscious patterns. But again, we are now being led by coaches that aren't in tune with themselves, and they're projecting their inner war out onto the athletes that they quote unquote lead. And I was able to do a lot of great things within hockey, but it also came with a lot of pain within that as well.
Yeah.
And again, I'm grateful for it all, but man, I see it all. I see it all in such a different lens now.
One of the things that was made clear to me as a young man growing up, particularly as a Black man growing up, is that our masculinity comes at a high price. It's not to be sold. It's not to be belittled. And it means everything, because it's one of the few intangibles that we control in a society where a lot of Black men have felt, rightfully so, oppressed and underfoot. So it may at times seem a bit exaggerated to someone outside of the Black culture. I'll give you an example. In sports, when a Black guy scores a touchdown or dunks on you, he may be screaming at the top of his lungs. Well, he's not necessarily screaming at his opponent. He's screaming at everything that led up to that moment. And is reminding everyone, I am indomitable. I will not be repressed. And that type of masculinity tends to present itself with a lot of machismo and bravado, or it's very quiet and intense. So the black masculinity that I grew up with was no nonsense. Crying was for weaklings, and yes, never be the last one to the punch. As soon as something is going to jump off, make sure you finish it and nullify the threat. I grew up with an older father too. My father fought in World War II, so his idea of being about one's business was a lot different than some of my peers, which made me a little bit more intense than others.
Oftentimes in business, who gets promoted to be the managers and the leaders? They're usually the person who excels at that role the most. So if you're an engineer and you're the best engineer, it's like, let's make this guy boss. But leading and doing are two very different things. And that is one of the things that is built into, I think, I'll speak for myself. My idea of what masculinity was growing up is like leadership. You're the head of the family. You're the head of the organization. You're the head of X, Y, or Z. Where I now know that that's not necessarily true. There is leadership skills, whether it's feminine or masculine or both. And then there's, not everyone's built to be that. My dad, I think, was kind of like your dad. There were some ways that were very much the old way of doing things. Old doesn't mean bad, but there were some antiquated ideas about it. But he was also, through his own trauma, way more, I would say, progressive in some of his ideals. I was lucky that my dad worked at a job that started amazing in a time when you worked one job and that's where you were going to retire from, turned into shit. But his perseverance, he stayed there far longer than he ever should have. Underappreciated, passed up for promotions, cutthroat things. And so when I was getting to the age of like, okay, I got to figure out what I want to do with my life, most dads of that era saw me playing with the video camera and said, would you put that shit away? Why are you guys still doing this shit? You didn't grow out of that? My dad said, you know what? Find something you love, find a way to make money for it and do that. I do not want any of my kids to end up at a job miserable like I am right now. This is not the way to do it. And he sacrificed. And so there's lots of things that I could use to define it, but one of them was, to an extent, what you talked about is like sacrifice for the people you care about. And I do think that there's something that's still built in me, even as I grow and learn, that is still there. And I use the word a lot when Kaylee and I talk about values and priorities. And to me, that comes out as integrity. Like, do what you say you're going to do, follow through, and be somebody that folks can rely on. Is that purely masculine? Of course not. But that is a part tied into my understanding of masculinity and is one of the traditional pieces of it that have stayed intact over the years that I personally value. But the crux of this conversation is all of our definitions are going to be slightly different. So before we get into more of the minutia of that, let's share what we see as the modern cultural understanding of men and masculinity. I'll start by saying, I think toxic masculinity is too often passed off as the norm. Be an alpha, don't be a beta. That's bullshit language. In fact, I read this book. I don't recommend it unless you are a masochist. It is called The Righteous Mind. Brilliant PhD level kind of reading. But it talked about a study that was done with apes of some sort, chimpanzees, the alpha males. The alpha males actually added no value or benefit to the rest of the pack. They would steal the food, they would take over, they would bully, they would, try to sleep with the other monkeys' women and stuff, to the point where the other monkeys would eventually rise up and kill them or oust them. So even the alphas that existed had to learn diplomacy to not be overthrown or killed. Our closest relative on the food chain are monkeys. As humans, the idea of the modern alpha male adds no value. It's all about knocking down everybody else in the zero-sum game. So women, you should be submissive. That's your role. I'm sorry, folks. No one's created less than anyone else. Doesn't mean that there can't be, I'm more of the leader and you're more of this person. I get it. survival taught us, hunters, food gatherers, right? Obviously, it's steeped in racism. It's steeped in xenophobia. It's steeped in white supremacy. It's not just male. It's very much a white male, right? So that is the cultural understanding that even when people say, no, I don't subscribe to that, you hear them saying something else. And it's like, I think it's influenced your opinion way more than what you are giving credit. So what do you guys think? What do you see out and about talking with other guys? Anything? Social media, the worst place to learn how to be a man?
I'm not going to pick up right now on that, but instead invite us to realize that there's, in the current American societal situation that we're in, there's another kind of masculinity that's being evidenced, where people are stepping up and being thoughtful and being responsive to the current stimuli and saying no.
Yeah. Where
toxic masculinity is yes, and damn it, it's my way, So I'm encouraged by some of that.
Sure. Well, yeah, and what you're saying does define what it's not.
Yeah.
In a way, too.
Yeah. But to answer your question, there's still way too much. My cojones are bigger than your cojones.
Yeah, the pissing contest out there. God, yeah. And you coach people, right? And you're a mentor. So I'm assuming you work with a lot of guys, and when they come to you, do they come to you raw, or do they come to you already having learned some of these things? What do you see as the expectation of what it means to be a man?
In order for me, in my process, in order for me to get them into their raw nature, I have to gain their trust first so that they're willing to be more open and vulnerable. And I'm not working with so many adults. It's more, teenagers. My oldest client is like 33, 34 years old. And again, primarily athletes. I do work with non-athletes as well. The one that kind of sticks out the most is, he lives down in Texas in sales, and trying to get him to go through different types of practices that will get him more just in touch with himself. Because I feel as though toxic masculinity is the absence of true masculinity. And I feel like a truly masculine man is also in touch with his feminine as well, and has the ability to be soft when needed. Not soft all the time, but I think...
And not soft in the way you're thinking, Peter. I mean...
Oh, good.
No, soft in regards to being in touch with his emotions, and understanding that for us to be true leaders and to live with integrity, you have to recognize and realize where your wounds are and where you haven't faced yourself. And I think there's so many men in society, whether that's in corporate America, businesses, heck, in the world of sports, that are so out of tune with themselves that they have to manipulate the external world because they're out of control in their internal world. And I think
that's a great line. I don't know if you use that a lot, but put it on your dating app.
Yeah. So it's, and heck, I was that, and I still will make mistakes.
I think you just nailed it. The modern definition is the absence of being in touch emotionally. Is that inner connectivity within yourself before you connect to other people?
Once we get beside a social norm, I think one of the definitions of modern masculinity is that you have to be beyond your muscle, beyond your brawn, and be in tune with your emotional vulnerabilities, or else you're not a strong man. Strong has to be malleable now, whereas before, especially for guys born in the 60s and 50s, strong meant rigid, inflexible, and unbreakable. So now there's a new version of strength that has to incorporate both of those things. You have to be malleable, and you should also be inflexible when it comes to your principles. I think the way we show our masculinity now is about our principles, more so than whether or not we can clean a 2-cycle engine.
We can't talk about the feminine side here as much today because you can't have 3 dudes at the table talking about it. But it is so important to acknowledge that we are all built with both masculine and feminine. And that is the alpha who pretends the feminine, softer side does not exist within them, that they are pure testosterone. Again, that is the monkey who steals your shit and you have to kill him. Nobody wants that. And same on the other side of that. You don't want a woman who is pure femininity because you're not actually built that way. So what you're doing is just completely ignoring part of your own human makeup.
And that's going to be limiting no matter which side you're talking about. In every way, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
The emotional is so deeply ingrained in the human experience to ignore it. So I think I was just born this way. Like I was just born deep. My parents always said, Matt's very deep. He's a very deep feeler and thinker. And over the years, I couldn't tell if they were saying that as a negative or a positive. I was never scolded for being that way, but it certainly was like, well, you know, his brother's the athlete. Matt's the deep thinker. And I think they mostly saw it as good, but there are certainly people who are like, well, you know, I'm sure you guys have experienced this. You're talking to a guy, and especially if you live in this space, it's hard to just do small talk about nothing. And you accidentally just go into your flow and they're like, what the fuck are we talking about? Did you just tell me your feelings?
I think people will be surprised to know that when men see each other and greet each other, that they not only what we call dap each other up with a series of handshakes, but we do hug and we do press cheek to cheek, face to face, to feel and know that you're all right. You know, I think that I think one of the things we saw growing up is that there were some dudes who were very quiet, very small, and they didn't take any shit from anybody. And they were on the side of righteousness. You know, like they weren't a prick, they weren't a bully, and that kind of defied our parents' expectations of what strength and masculinity was. So for us to be able to greet each other with a hug and to even like right now, I get choked up thinking about, you know, there are people who care about you, who are guys who would go back to back and shoulder to shoulder with you. And that should make you feel good. I think one of the things that gets in the way of our parent and child relationship, especially for men, is that we never, as dads, are willing to show our sons us fallen. They never see us fallen. They only hear our tales of us, you know, exceeding expectations and being victorious. But I think opening up and saying that, hey, there have been times I know you and I during COVID where we just talked to each other just to make sure this shit wasn't gonna all just end. And if it was, then let's get drunk one more time. You know, we broke bread at a time when people were afraid to sit together and black and whites weren't talking to each other.
The people in this episode, Peter, Hassan, the close men in my circles, every time I see you, we don't do handshakes, you hug me. You say, I love you on a regular basis. That is something 10 years ago I can't even fathom. I met Jacob. I did shake his hand. At the end of the conversation, he's like, come here, give me a hug. What are we doing? Men showing love and connection, not just to women, but to other men, whether you're straight, gay, or anything else, is so important. And it is what has been lacking for so long. And why I think...
You mean humans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's where we have so much trouble in this country right now, is that we've abandoned our humanity, far too many of us.
Yeah.
And we're focusing on the differences. And there's always going to be differences. He's taller than I am. He's better looking than I am. He's younger than I am. Yeah, that's okay. But
fight it out.
But yeah, we can either fight it out
or talk about it.
We can we can talk about it, and I can learn things from him. You know, he said 3 things already today. I wish I had my pen, you know, to write them down. So,
we are recording.
So I'm gonna
this.
watch the podcast and catch them then.
That's the only way we'll get views, Peter. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, I'm an old marketing guy, and so I'm here for you. Seriously though, when we fail to recognize the humanity in any situation, we're not going to get as much out of that situation as we possibly could. We're never going to be as happy as we would like to be. We're never going to be as successful as and powerful. Power comes with, you know, with being well-rounded, because then you're working all your tools and you're going to get more out of life when you do that.
And that's where it becomes meta, where it is part of itself, the snake eating its tail, because not only would you rationally believe I should be using everything in my arsenal to live my life. A real man can fight with one arm behind his back. How stupid is that? Like, we lost this idea of, if it becomes necessary, I will keep moving up that hill with one leg. But you're doing this on purpose with intention. What has been stripped out in again, we're talking the modern high level. Not everybody believes this, but stripping out the emotional strength, all physical. Well, no, being a man is, it's nothing is pure physical. It is, in fact, I would say I am far more mental and emotional than I am physical.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And whether or not you out there think I'm a pansy, I don't really care. That's what it's called, having emotional intelligence. But also, like, strength, like physical strength, the only reason that that's important is that's what's kept men on top for so long. What are the women going to do? Fight us off the hill? No, men are built on average stronger, faster than women. But that's the only reason. People are like, well, men have led societies from the beginning. Yeah, it's going great. and vulnerability, part of the definition you gave at the beginning, what we're seeing from a lot of our leaders, what we're seeing from people in the media, is the inability to be vulnerable, and even more so, be humble. And this is not a political statement. This is a factual statement. Our president has never once admitted fault to anything.
At all. Just at all.
If I'm working for a company or if I'm following an organization, if the leader has an excuse or a reason for every mistake they make or every bad thing that happens, I'm like, well, you're full of shit, because you're not we are so flawed as humans. The ability to admit I fucked up is the most masculine thing to me, in my opinion.
Because then you have the opportunity to do something about that and make it better.
Yeah. Well, and then you think about it too, going back to what Peter had said in terms of the power, in terms of that success. I mean, obviously that's a man that most people would view as one of the most successful people in the world. And he's got a lot of quote unquote power, but in my opinion, in many different areas of life, he's powerless.
Yeah.
Because of his lack of inner understanding, right? And his inability to take ownership and actually live with integrity, you know? And there's so many different areas you could go with that, but I think
Pick one.
Again, when it goes to modern times, everybody is just so focused on the external success, and everybody's got a different definition of what that looks like, and most people will always equate it to money. And you can find people that are massively externally successful, but how often are they manipulative and abusive to the people that are quote unquote under them?
Well, Eckhart Tolle, who I largely love and agree with, said in one of the books I read this last year that massive wealth is actually a mental illness, because you are hoarding resources. It's not that like, hey, you can have as much as you want, and you're actually hoarding those resources from other people getting them. And that idea, like, billionaires and the ultra wealthy have the image of success and happiness, but we've seen there's some of the most miserable people. And somebody who says this isn't enough, you can't tell me that you're happy. You can't tell me that you've reached any form of true success in your life.
We have a whole generation of guys who are literally raised by their moms. It's one thing for your mom to be a presence in the household and she run the household and dad is there. But there's a whole group of people who are raised with dad not there at all. And I think our societal construct suffers from that because we have a very one-sided emotional approach. Look at Donald Trump. He's a guy that never won his father's love and approval, and he acts like a very emotional, needy toddler or needy person.
What was the line you said about outward versus internal, or
I don't recall exactly, but something.
Run the tape back.
I think there's so many men in society, whether that's in corporate America, businesses, heck, in the world of sports, that are so out of tune with themselves that they have to manipulate the external world because they're out of control in their internal world.
That's it. Like success, I would safely assume you guys see success as very much equally internal and external. Like, and not tangible even.
And I would also say in the current state that this world is in, I think in a lot of ways, at least for me currently, the external isn't exactly matching the internal. Like I'm at a great place of peace and happiness within, and it's not always going to result on the outside in the way that it is on the inside.
God,
with
no.
Again, with all the AI and the job, getting a job, heck, coming from a hockey background, all I've done is hockey. So getting a job that requires 3 to 5 years of experience, we were talking about this at dinner the other night. How do I get experience that if I can't even get a job?
Good old catch-22 of modern capitalism.
Yeah.
But everything we're talking about is that sense of being a man, being masculine, all these things is not in a vacuum. It is the world we live in is, always will be, always has been a scary place. We have our moments of like, oh, everything is meshing up. But it's the reliance on, well, once I get this promotion or once I can find this thing, I'll be happy. Like you cannot look for that type of success and fulfillment from the outside world.
And I don't think, I know for me, it always used to be striving for happiness, but as we all know, happiness comes and goes. I think what people could be seeking is peace. Peace in knowing that regardless of what's coming, I can be at peace with it, knowing that if it's a storm in the external, I know that the storm's going to pass. Again, happiness, somebody could come right away and take it away from you, so.
Let's dig into that for a second. Peace isn't necessarily quiet or free from conflict or suffering. How do you define peace?
Peace is acceptance of understanding the role I've played in whatever the situation is, but also understanding that even when it is chaotic, I can still be in that place of peace and acceptance, but not doing nothing about it, still trying to change the external situation. But I think, in my opinion, it all comes from here, from within,
But the prerequisite, and the prerequisite for that is understanding. So there has to be an engagement with the world, a reasonable engagement with the world, so that you can accept your place in it. But there are some people who are so totally either ignorant by choice or intentionally self-delusional that they're not understanding the realities of the world. And therefore, those people will never find the ability to accept the situation they find themselves in, and therefore the ability to boil that down to a peaceful situation.
And I myself I've looked back and said, our emotional and mental journeys that we go through, like what you end up with is a little bit of understanding and perception. But there's been times in my life where I did mistake peace for quiet and going, I just don't want to have to deal with any more shit. Well, the thing is, especially in those times, the world seems to throw more shit at you.
Because the shit's still out there. And you're just not choosing to deal.
And you're speaking to the universe and saying, am I going to have to keep dealing with shit? They're like, oh, that's what you want? Here's some more shit. But it truly is. It's having the tools and being trusting enough in yourself to go, I can weather any storm. It doesn't mean it's going to be fun. Doesn't mean I look forward to it, but I sure as hell can get through it. And to me, there's nothing that encapsulates masculinity more than that notion, but it's an impossible thing if you're not in tune with yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, a truly masculine man creates safety as well. I think going back to the story about the monkeys and the alpha, there was a lot of fear that those monkeys were putting out, right? Until the other beta monkeys got over it, right? Not willing to accept that anymore as their reality. They rose up. But I think, again, for a man to truly be a safe space for somebody else to be fully themselves, they again have to be in touch with themselves. And I think a situation happened with my daughter just 2 days ago where she was breaking down. She was struggling like crazy. And I came to her recognizing, okay, she's dealing with some heavy emotions. I'm not going to deny that. I'm going to give her space to feel that. Picked her up, sat her in my lap, and within 15, 20 seconds, I could just feel the tension within her body just release. She softened because she could feel my strength. And I just gave her that space to, again, feel what she needed to feel. And before you know it, she was completely fine. So she felt safe. She felt seen. She felt understood. And I think, again, coming back, bring that all back to masculinity, we have to be able to create safety for other people as well, whether we're leaders, owning a job or, a business or a company. I think there's so many bosses out there and there's not enough leaders because so many of these quote unquote leaders aren't able to lead themselves.
Right.
And so that's where then you get so many businesses and jobs that are just in complete chaos and people hate showing up.
And of course, we're looking at it from just a few instances, but your relationships in general, the kind of person, I know so many guys who it was like, if they were having a really hard time and struggling, I had my dad. I could talk to my dad about that stuff. And it was something I think I took for granted. But like, there's so many guys, it's like, oh, my dad, and some of the dads cared, but they did not have the tools or the ability to know how to be present in those awkward, uncomfortable times.
Because they hadn't evolved beyond the point of, oh, I'm the dad. I got to be, strong.
And no one showed them the way.
Yeah, that's it. I got to be strong and I got to know everything and be in charge. And this kid, you're coming to me, you're my son, you're coming to me and asking these questions that I got no answer for. So I'm just going to push you away and not let you come. Or to me, which
I'll
is
sit
terrible.
here and I'll listen, but I don't know what to do or say. And that's the real true misunderstanding with emotional vulnerability. You never know what to do or say. You just stay in the moment with them. And I am so fortunate. Like Peter, you and I, our relationship has deepened over the years because of those moments, not because of time or hours logged, right? Peter and I were working together. We traveled together. We were doing all kinds of stuff.
And you had the downtime and we'd talk.
But we still did the bro stuff, man. We played in a beer pong championship. We'd go to the bars when we were, at least when I was single, and, Peter would wingman me. We had great times. But like, it also included when I was going through a divorce, I texted Peter and he goes, shit, beer's on me this day, this time, be there. And he sat in the fucking mud with me as we talked through this stuff, not trying to tell me how to deal with it. And we all have we're all guilty of like bad listening styles at times, but like, what can I do? What can we do? Let's talk about it. That is missing in the community of men on a larger whole.
And I think it kind of pays to Peter's point earlier when you were talking about just simply having conversations and you realize that you have a lot more in common. So had you guys been doing all the things that you guys were doing, but there was no depth within your conversation, you would get so lost in these, perceived differences. But it was because you guys were talking, you realize you guys have a lot more in common. And I think that is directly connected to the current state of men.
Yeah.
We don't have conversations. We sit on the sidelines and we create these speculatory, again, stories that because he's of different colored skin or a different background or you never played hockey, that they don't know what I've been through. Well, once you open up and have those vulnerable conversations, we have so much more in common.
Well, and the vulnerable part. So like Peter and I were going through a divorce at the same time. Peter was like, he had logged like 6 months earlier than me. So he's like, well, here's what's coming up next, and we did the episode on divorce, and we were at 2 different stages, but we both went through so much of the same stuff. But here's the thing. At the same time, and you guys, I know, have experienced this, you talk to the guys who aren't comfortable with that shit, and they'll talk with you, but they don't sit in the muck. They sling it, right? It's like, women are all the same.
Yeah.
Like that.
Oh, you got
that kind of talk has happened forever.
Oh, yeah.
And it's actually detrimental because it doesn't allow you to feel the true feelings. It says, let's replace all of the emotions with anger and just, stonewalling.
Yeah, you got to slap her down. You got to push back. You got to do this. And any sentence that's got the word should in it, when somebody's talking at you,
yeah,
you ought to put a barrier up.
You should.
Yeah, you should.
Don't you dare use that word with me, Peter.
Yeah, see, there you go. And that's because, to your last comment, when we wall like that, we'll never get to the understanding so that we can get to the acceptance, so that we can then get to the peace. I mean,
So here's something, and we can all reflect on our own past behaviors in this. And I know a couple right off the bat that come up for both of you, and for me, I'm a little bit of all of them. There's a book, The Mask of Masculinity, How Men Can Embrace Vulnerability, Create Strong Relationships, and Live Their Fullest Lives, by Lewis Howes. So there is, he pulls out 9 specific masks that men often hide behind. Instead of being vulnerable, there's the stoic, there's the material mask, aggressive, invincible, alpha, the athlete, sexual, joker, know-it-all. I think I've been all of these at times, but
yeah, I got those badges on my sash.
I would
too.
say the one that has been the worst in my life, if I look at all these for real, is probably the know-it-all. I think there's been times where I thought knowing was more important than doing or feeling. Like, not necessarily that I would use it against other people, but against myself. Like, instead of being like, I need to unpack this and feel it, I'd be like, I already know how this is going to play out. I already know why this situation is happening. Bro, that is not mental health. That is avoiding mental health. What would you say? You've shared some stuff. If you want to share it about your past of the kind of stuff that happened as on the road and being a professional and the kind of shit that you did to mask.
Yeah. In the world of hockey, and I know it's more of a societal thing, but I was obviously in the world of hockey, and it's very toxic and certainly can be, but it's so much of the hookup culture. And it was all about having funny stories to tell in the locker room on Monday, and womanizing and sleeping with women, knowing full well that you're not going to even talk to them the next day. But I get to tell a story in the locker room on Monday, and that's going to get laughs, and I'm going to be able to please my teammates. And I know for me, because I was so lost within, I had no identity outside of the game of hockey, that's all I cared about. I was so internally at war with myself, with no peace, no happiness, that I gained happiness from my teammates' acceptance. So I was the life of the party. Every single party, drank with the intention to black out, and I succeeded on most nights. And my intention was to ensure that everybody was looking at me, laughing, and wanting to join in on the team shotguns, and so I was a victim to that. But I would say for me that I was so unconscious and I didn't know. I was unaware of my own wounds. I'd say for me, again, knowing what my trauma was, that it was always going to be sexual in nature, just based on what I experienced as a child. But I think for me, when the thing that I struggle with sometimes the most is that once I started working on myself, using spirituality in my depth to bring people close to me, and then not be forthright, not be completely honest with them because I lived my life with so much pain. I don't want other people to experience pain. So I would withhold information and then still continue in these relationships. And
so you had the image of vulnerability without the work.
so I had the vulnerability. I had that down, but what I wasn't able to do, and I don't know, I still probably struggle with it at times, is I don't want other people to hurt. And I know that if I say this or leave this, that it's going to cause hurt. So I'm not going to do that. Yeah. And I'm just going to continue on, even though I'm not in it anymore.
Well, and I say, not that you were not in an absolute form, but like vulnerability is a swing door that opens both ways. So some people are like super forthright in sharing all of their dirt, but that's not true vulnerability because they're not allowing the door to swing back with other people to share on it. And that is something that I've done in the past too. I was like, I'm an open book. Well, that's not necessarily vulnerability. Vulnerability is also discernment. Vulnerability is also being open to what's coming through the floodgates your way. And that's something that I've done in the past too. But I could tell people, no, I'm very vulnerable. No, you're not. You're just a loudmouth. Those are two different things. Peter, I think you told me that, right? You said, Matt, you should shut the fuck up.
No, I don't think I said should, but I think I said must.
Amen.
Because you got to be able to hear yourself too.
Yeah, there was a time when the only way I could feel any type of control and or power expressed was through my sexual prowess. There was a time when that was not only a way of soothing any type of inadequacy or any type of hurt that I was going through, but it also was a way of me dealing with my issues of detachment and not wanting to ever be alone. And for a guy to admit that you don't want to be alone is tough. To say that to yourself, especially when you're around guys who not being with someone is cool. When you're around people who having one here, there, and everywhere is cool. And for a guy like me, I don't have a problem even saying this. I was, even as a young man, I was a guy that unless I'm emotionally locked in, my piping doesn't even work the same. So it's one of those things where, yeah, I wore that mask of sexual prowess or want to be sexually showing some prowess in the form of sexuality. Also, the mask of invincibility. I remember I was dating someone and she told me, she said, those things didn't make you stronger. You're just a survivor of abuse. I was telling her about my growing up, and she said, you've never said those words in relation to your father, in relation to you. It's not that it made you stronger. You're a survivor of abuse. You're traumatized. So it's the difference between silk and leather. Leather doesn't start off soft. It has to be beaten and tanned and treated a certain way, traumatically, to make it get that soft. So you're not just weathered, you're beaten and abused. And it's not just invincibility, it's trauma, and you're a survivor. That's a tough pill to deal with as a man because we don't think of ourselves like that.
When you said life of the party, I sat up straight because when we were talking about getting together for this conversation, that was one of the things that came front and center to me, because in my 20s, probably, newly married, I had to be the life of the party. I can still crack a joke now and then, but man, I needed to be on the whole time. And
do you know, did you ever really dig into that and figure out why? I know where it comes from in me.
No, I backed in. I backed out of that and into what I hope is a little better me now, just by going. That first of all, that was exhausting. Oh my God, that's a lot of work.
Yeah,
and it really wasn't paying off in ways that the jokester who was working to be the life of the party, he was getting his payoffs, payoffs. Short-lived.
That happiness, that fleeting emotion, not that.
But this, the better guy in here was kind of eventually came away from that and went, you don't really have to do that anymore because, it's just even working for you. And
it had to have served you at some point, right?
At some point, yeah.
Because you wouldn't have continued to do it.
Well, that's right.
But
you get something out. But it was just like this part of.
But then it becomes
what I wanted to be.
Becomes this thing that you're like, why am I doing this? I don't even enjoy it anymore.
Yeah.
I have set this expectation for myself, and that's a great metaphor to masculinity in general. Is why am I doing these things? So many people are guilted or shamed into acting in a role, especially men, because that's what you're supposed to do. Well, it's making me miserable. So if you're surrounded by people who are decent, they tell you, you're in pain, stop doing that. But when you have people around you who are just as out of tune with themselves, it's like, stop bitching. You're a man, suck it up. So it's a perpetual cycle. And we've all been victim of it. We've all been the villains in it. We've been every part. So let's talk about what we do to break that cycle. You said you broke the cycle of your generational curse in your family. I think in many ways I've been the cycle breaker in my family. And being the cycle breaker, it does not necessarily mean you're appreciated for it. So let's just throw that out there. It's fucking work. You want to be a man? Get ready to work hard, because that is some of the hardest work.
I'd first react to your comment that you're not necessarily appreciated for being the cycle breaker, because, a prophet is never recognized in his own land.
Don't worry. We'll saint you after,
Well, you're bringing bad news. You're pushing back against. All the guys in the locker room were encouraging you to be that jerk.
You're breaking the paradigm
that's the way
that's
we
serving
were.
Supposedly the rest of the group.
So if you push back and you change, so yes, that can be difficult. But
were you that? Have you been that in any of your groups? No, because everyone's always just loved Peter for who he is. No, I make that joke, but the truth is almost uncanny. Of Peter is to say 1 in a million is selling you short, and I'm not just trying to blow smoke up your ass. I truly think Peter is the guy who's like, I no longer need to be the life of the party, but he finds himself being it without trying. And it's and what I think it is as you evolve. If this is too woo-woo for you out there, I don't apologize. It is, you're actually oscillating at a higher frequency, and people out there pick it up, and you find yourself not needing to make excuses or give reasons for behaviors.
Listen to him, because he really did kind of have I think maybe a glimmer there.
Every once in a while.
I can still be fun and on retreat, at the end of the sharing of the, hey, thank you, Jacob, for what you brought, and thank you, Matt, for what you brought, and I'll get the, and you kept it light at times that really helped. So yeah, I guess that does kind of work, and maybe that is how that happened. I gave up the had to. You should never use should. I learned that from one of the 87 million hours of therapy that I've had. But the other thing that guy Bill taught me was when you have to, you ought to be thinking about that too. I have to be the funniest person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. Stop and think about that for a minute. You're relatively attractive. You've got a wife who loves you. You've got, 2 really sweet girls. And, do you have to be that freaking funny too?
Wouldn't it just be nice if you showed up the way you wanted to.
Yeah. And
holy shit.
yeah. And imagine what that might turn out to be when you give up the have to. And yeah, I think I'm still kind of funny at times.
But you know what's really scary about that?
I don't have to be.
That speaks to me really hard, because you know what really is important there in that message is when you say, maybe I don't have to, there is a fear of, will they still love me and accept me when I'm not that role?
Big time.
And what's really hard is when you show up as your true, what's the name of your podcast? Raw, what?
Raw, authentic, and vulnerable.
When you show up as your true, raw, authentic, and vulnerable self,
What are they going to say then?
and they don't like it, then your entire world just unraveled. You just realized, I might not have a healthy social group.
Yeah. Because then you've developed some understanding that you can then.
I'm telling you, that's it. Look,
You can
I
then
say
adjust,
that from a place
adjust
of
it.
empathy of somebody who experienced it. That is fucking hard. And I'm not saying so you shouldn't do the work. I'm saying that's something you need to know going in. You want to talk about masculinity and being a man. That is the hard work.
Perfect. Exactly the way I was going to point and say yes. Then there's an inkling that you really are getting to be a man, because you're daring to do something that might not work out very well for you, but you got the balls to try it anyway, knowing that I'm going to be okay. This is scary as hell for me right now, but I'm going to do it because that way wasn't working.
Right.
And I'm going to look for something different.
Yeah.
And it might not work out, but I'm going to be okay anyway, because I love and trust myself enough.
You're replacing those heavy weights with some heavy emotional lifting. And that is what I think is greatly needed.
Yeah, I think, if you can tie what he just said into the masks, when you're the one wearing the mask consistently out in society, you find yourself amongst other people that are wearing their own masks. And when you start taking your masks off and getting back to the root of yourself, you recognize you don't need to perform, and you don't need these other people in your life to feel okay, and I feel as though with the more work you do on yourself, I don't think we're meant to have hundreds of people in our life and have an abundance of friends. I think we're supposed to have more quality, and the more okay you are with yourself, the more okay you are with having a smaller circle of just high quality people.
That was one of the hardest lessons for me to learn. And my therapist put it was like, no one's saying cut all these people out of your life, but like, it's a target, right? Who's in the bullseye? You and maybe two other people. Then the next ring out. Like, the further the rings go out, you can have drinking buddies. You can have guys who you don't have those conversations with.
And some of them can be jerks.
Yeah.
But it can work. The other thing that I was screaming internally about was when you take your mask off and you look at the rest of the masked people in that circle, and you may not need those people. The other thing that's going to happen is some of them are going to take their masks off too. And oh my God.
Wait, you're just like me? We can take our masks off
You're
here?
afraid of that too? Or you think that's prayer? You like to pray too?
So while there are the guys out there, and this is not a shaming, it's a reality, because we all, the three of us and so many others out there have had to face it, is that mask does not make you Batman. It actually makes you weak. Like stoicism and the other masks we just talked about are not, I'm doing this because I'm strong. You're actually doing it because you're scared. But before I ask my last thing, is there anything that you feel like we didn't touch on?
One, realizing that our words have power. It's never too late to offer one's hand and or being in a relationship where you can salvage something. It's never too late to salvage what is. If it doesn't exist anymore, then it's truly non-salvageable. But if people are here, whatever relationships have been broken, have been tarnished, they're worth lending a hand towards being salvaged, at least that hand. Oftentimes, we as men think that, we hear songs like Desperado and, all these cool songs that we can ride off in the distance alone. No, fuck that. Those are cop-outs. realizing that being alone was a cop-out, realizing that promiscuity was a cop-out, realizing that self-defeatist behavior was copping out is one of the things that made me stronger, more reliable, more dependable, more accountable.
I would say, being a single parent now for 8 years, I think so much of the masculinity has to be tied into women as well, and just what type of safety, again, that we're providing for women out there. Because I know a lot of them are so in their masculine because of the manipulation and abuse that unconscious men have put them through. And again, I've been right there. I've made mistakes, and I will continue to make mistakes. So I think, again, at the base of true masculinity has to be emotional understanding, emotional intelligence, the willingness to take ownership and recognize when we make mistakes, own that to whoever it is that's around us. But I think we'd see a much healthier world and culture if men were healthy and women were healthy, and we could all come together and be healthy together and have conversations about how we've all fucked up.
Couldn't have said it better. That was beautiful.
I got nothing.
I'm going to ask my co-producer. I actually think instead of trying to sandwich any of those things in there, I think we need to do an episode standalone on polarity.
Yes.
Because, we are the yin or the yang, whatever you want to say. But like when we do become overly masculine, our partners then, if we're with a woman, our partners become overly feminine to compensate. And that's bad for both people. And it's not whose fault it is. It's cause and effect, and just, we're going to morph. So like, I know this in my relationships. If even just in dating, you're talking about, if a woman doesn't feel safe, she will lean into some of her masculine to protect. And that sometimes, like, it's funny, you'll find women who have toxic masculinity, right? And that's the reality. That's the nature of it. And so I want to end this episode, first of all, thanking both of you for taking your time and really giving me a lot to think about. And I feel like we need to do several more episodes on this. We barely scratched the surface of the tip of the iceberg that we blew a kiss at in the ocean, right? But let me, so that there's not a misunderstanding for you out there listening or watching, we're also not saying that all of the individual notions of the old way of thinking of masculinity are in themselves bad. There's nothing wrong with being an athlete and being highly competitive. There's nothing wrong. It's the notion that there is a cookie cutter mold out there that this is a man. There is no mold. It's what serves you and how do you serve the people in your circles. And so I want to end by saying, let's go get some beers and watch Die Hard. What's your favorite man movie? And your Sound of Music is not an acceptable answer here. I know Nazis were in it, but that doesn't count.
How about the 10 Commandments?
That is a good man movie. And it's got Charlton Heston, the man of all men, right?
There you go.
Favorite guy movie? Okay, it'd have to be, and now look, if you put this on with your girl, she's gonna look at you like you're the smoothest, deepest guy in the world. So I'm letting you guys in on game. My favorite guy movie would have to be Love Jones. Love Jones is it's not a romantic comedy at all, but more like a rom-dram, if you will. It's a young guy, he's a photographer. He has a motorcycle, Matt. He can dance, but he also is cool. And he's spoken word poet, but you know what? He's not a avant-garde artist. He plays vinyl while everyone else is on to digital and CDs. You know what I mean? He's that guy. So Lorenz Tate plays a guy named Darius Lovehall, and his co-star is Nia Long. Oh my gosh. So we see him be a tremendous guy of guys, and it's classic Hollywood of boy meets girl, boy gets girl, boy loses girl, boy tries to get girl back. So it fits the formula that guys our age who love cinema, we grew up seeing this formula. Great performances by Isaiah Washington, who, because of his what was considered toxic masculinity, cost him his career, the trajectory of his career in Hollywood, at least. He's in it. puts in great work. So yeah, Love Jones with Lorenz Tate and Nia Long and Isaiah Washington.
Favorite man movie, or at least top 10, let's say.
I don't watch too many movies anymore.
A sports movie?
I mean, I enjoy Miracle. It's not necessarily a man movie.
That's a man movie.
Yeah.
The U.S., not known for hockey, goes and beats the country known for hockey, and Kurt Russell heading it. There's nothing more manly than that shit. Come on.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Die Hard 3. Die Hard with a Vengeance might be my favorite man movie. And and as a man, you go back and watch some of this shit and you're like, ooh, that didn't age too well. But you know what? You still appreciate it for what it was. Love me a good man movie. And we can still love lifting weights. We can still love drinking with our buddies. We can still love meeting women and doing all of these things. It's what's the context of how it serves us and how we are serving the people around us.
Yeah, I was sharing this as it relates to masculinity in relationships. If you have a woman that understands how important it is for you to insert and initiate and insinuate your masculine presence at every turn, it will be fed, and you won't have to have so many false shows of false bravado. You won't have to have so many faux demonstrations of masculinity presenting itself in some adornment or activity, but you'll walk within your masculinity. You'll make others around you feel safe. You'll make others around you feel comfortable. You don't mind being the brunt of the joke because you realize everybody can win. It's all right for other fuckers to win. That's real masculinity.
I hadn't thought of it the way Hassan said it, but I think that's got something to it. When you are not being the best you're forcing the other people around you to not be the best them. So whether in your example, whether it's, the female that the male is engaged with, or whether it's, the teammates, in the hockey locker room, anytime you're not being you the best you can, you will not invite the other who's across from you to be the best them that they can be. And therefore, they're not going to give you as much as they possibly can. And therefore, you're not going to be as happy as you possibly could be. So stop screwing it up. Just be the best you can be.
Which is raw, authentic,
you got it,
and vulnerable.
Yeah. I'm dying to get that badge for my sash.
So, sorry, bros, if we didn't talk enough testosterone and energy drinks and all the other crazy shit out there. But the reality is your life will be more fulfilled. And if you're a guy who loves bird dog and chicks, women will actually like you that much more. Believe it or not, if you touch your feminine side and get to know it a little bit, holy shit.
And keep doing that, because these series of episodes that you and your co-producer have been putting together are important because you're sharing information with people. So even I keep coming back and watching more of your stuff.
You are such a good marketing guy.
Well, I made a...
Let's hire Peter for the Going There podcast.
Oh, cool.
Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time. We just went there. Now you can go to thegoingtherepodcast.com for links to all the podcast platforms, our socials, and of course, YouTube. While you're at it, give us a rating, share with a friend, and subscribe.
This podcast is brought to you in part by its host and Frame One Media, in association with Kaylee Williams, Joe Calley, and Bobby Thomas.